Hello, this is your insane person, Westgon. I am going to attempt to help everybody who wants help with Retribution Paladins. I'm going to go over the stats, conduits and legendaries, talents, single target damage, AoE damage, and things to keep in mind. The first thing I'm going to comment on is that I am not putting as much effort as others would into making any guides, so I'm going to be using the snipping clip tool a lot instead of putting them in afterwards so that I can see what I'm doing and hopefully you guys can see what I'm doing as well. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is stats. The stats I'm going to get. Here are the stats. The main stat is haste. You want haste above everything else. Mastery and critical strike, you're going to want to try and get right beside each other. After that, you have intellect and item levels, but if an item is like 3 item levels higher and it has versatility on it, it's pretty much garbage and you do not want to get it. Try to avoid any piece of gear with versatility. It does not help you at all and does almost nothing for our class. But you want the haste to go faster, mastery and critical strike. Intellect is always nice, but the other stats kind of do a little bit better. Thus, the second thing I'm going to talk about is the conduits. This is one of the things that you might be confused about. The conduit person I go with for DPS output. I have not finished my renown because I am slow and I don't like doing the campaign, but I'm going to do it at some point. The main conduit that you're going to want to do is you're going to want Ring Clarity, which gives your Divine Tool a 56% chance to cast 3 extra times on the main target. That's the main one that you're going to need. You're going to want the Potency Conduit. I have it down here. But even if it's like item level 160 or something, you're still going to want it in. Maybe a 40% chance, but that's a nice extra piece of damage. But if you don't get it to proc, that's going to hurt your DPS, so the 56% chance is really high and is really nice, especially when you're doing single target damage. AoE, it doesn't do as much, but it still helps, because it puts out a little bit more damage to the targets. And everything else, like your endurance and your potency, is up to you. I like to use the Lights Barding, Fineness, Thinness, or whatever, potency to increase my divine speed duration by 60%, but that's completely up to whoever's doing it. And then the divine call, I tend to steal aggro a lot, so I just have this one on just in case. The other one I have is my Templar's Vindication. One of the talents I recommend is Zeal, but if you have Templar's Vindication, go with Righteous Verdict. If you don't, go with Zeal. I'm just going to be with Zeal so I can just show what to do. You can take either. Both are reliable, but that's pretty much what I want to recommend with the conduits. With legendaries, the only real one I would recommend is actually the one I'm on right now, which is for AoE. Divine Storm projects an additional wave of light, striking all enemies up to 20 yards in front of you for 20% of Divine Storm's damage. It's pretty nice. It does a lot of range here. You can see it. If I hit my Divine Shield, it procs, so I'll do it again. And it just does a wave in front of me. And it's really nice. It does quite a bit of damage. I did 2.2k just from Divine Storm. It actually procced 2 times, which is really nice, and it's very nice to do damage because your Divine Storm, if you're next to them, will also do a lot more damage. The third thing I want to talk about is the single target damage. The rotation that I use for single target damage, I will move over here again with my wonderful snipping tools. This is what I generally cast at the start. It's a Shield of Vengeance, then I hit my Avenging Wrath, along with Wake of Ashes. Templar's Verdict comes after that because you want to be spending your holy power. Divine Toll, hopefully it procs. If it doesn't proc, you're going to hit a Blade of Wrath and then your Templar's Verdict. Then you're going to follow up with your Crusader Strike, Blade of Justice, Judgment, and Hammer of Wrath. Whatever's on cooldown, Hammer of Wrath is the most likely to be used. You're going to use that more than the other 3 there are, so you're going to want to keep that in mind. I'll show you what my the rotation that I just showed you. So you're going to want to hit your Shield of Vengeance, which is my 8, and then Avenging Wrath with a Wake of Ashes, and then you're going to want to use your Templar's Verdict, and then your Divine Toll to get more Templar's Verdict. Then I'm going to use my Hammer of Wrath to get another Templar's Verdict. Then you're going to use your 3 abilities to continuously get Templar's Verdict as many times as you can. It'll get faster and faster the more times you use it. I recommend using a training dummy before heading into a raid or a dungeon to figure out your single target rotation, or AoE as it is. It's your single target damage, and I guess I need to point out the talents. I already commented on the first row. Zeal and Righteous Verdict, those are your 2 main ones that you're going to be wanting to use in either single target or AoE situations. Doesn't matter. Execution Sentence is for a more complicated build that you can use, but I don't recommend it, mainly because I can barely pull it off, and the only times you really want to be using it is I use it on Inspiring Week and no other time, so there's almost no point to learn it. Unless you're going into plus 15s or higher, there's no point to learn it, because this build does just as much DPS, just like 50 lower, which is not a whole lot. Your second row is going to be Imperium Power if you're going for AoE or dungeon scenarios. I would go with Blade of Wrath if you're doing single target or raid scenarios. Your 30 row is whatever you want. The Fist of Justice, each holy power reduces your remaining cooldown of Hammer of Justice, which is pretty nice. Your Hammer of Justice is your stun for 1 minute. It stuns the target for 6 seconds. Apparently the training dummy is immune to it, so it doesn't do much to that. The other one is Repentance. It's a nice CC ability that you can use during a dungeon if your team needs a CC and nobody else, like a hunter, is there, or any other type of CC, Hex, Sheep, or Imprison, anything that works as a CC. The third one is Blinding Light. This one I tend to use a lot in dungeons because it blinds the targets. Especially if you get aggro right away from doing your rotation, you can blind to light them and then they get disoriented, and hopefully the tank hits them next, taking back the aggro as much as possible. But I like to use Fist of Justice when I'm out in the world. It's also why it's equipped right now, because stunning a target like an elite if you're doing a world quest is really handy. The 35 row, I use Cavalier and Cavalier only. Eye for an Eye does almost no reduction. It's not even viable in any way, shape, or form. You're not going to want to touch it at all. Unbreakable Spirit can be used if you want to. Your Shield of Vengeance can't help you, but I use Cavalier as much as possible because it's your only mobility that you have, and it is on a 45-second recharge, and it will only last 4.8 seconds. You can increase its mount speed by 20% for everybody, and you can use that in open world. Like, you can mount up on your mount, you can use your Crusader order aura to go faster, but I use it for your Divine Steed to make that go faster, more faster than it normally would. Then the next row is 40. Seraphim can be good, but you have to time it perfectly, and it's almost impossible to when you're doing a raid or a dungeon. I don't recommend ever using this. Holy Avenger, it's a 3-minute cooldown for only 20 seconds of holy power regeneration tripled, and your Divine Purpose procs way more than your Holy Avenger does, and your Divine Purpose has a 15% chance to make your next holy ability free and deal 20% increased damage. I'm almost positive it's higher than 15% because every pull you see I attack this, I hit my abilities, my virtue, Then maybe I'll get a proc somewhere. It's not going to give me a proc now, is it? Yeah, there's the proc. You can see it above my nameplates. That's your proc for Divine Purpose. It'll allow you to attack your target once more with many other variable means to attack the target, either Divine Storm or Templar's Verdict. If you need to heal, you can also pop a Word of Glory. Your 45 row is Healing Hands and Healing Hands only. The cooldown of Land Hands is reduced by 60% based on the target's missing health. This is also why you don't take Unbreakable Spirit, because your Land Hands is also being reduced with your Healing Hands, so it's not too bad. The other two don't really help you. Selfless Healer just destroys your DPS, and Justicar's Vengeance doesn't do anything for healing regards. The 50 row is... I used to use Crusade. I love Crusade, but you can no longer use Crusade. Your main one is going to be Sanctified Wrath, and Sanctified Wrath only. Final Reckoning was really good at the start of the X-Pack, but after a few things got nerfed and buffed, Final Reckoning is a little worse than Sanctified Wrath, so in all situations, you use your Sanctified Wrath. Single Target and AoE are basically the exact same. The only talent row you need to be changing on Single Target towards AoE is Blade of Wrath and Imperium Power. Blade of Wrath for single target, and Imperium Power for raid or single target. But to be honest, I use my Imperium Power for single target and raid because of the damage, and I like to use my Divine Storm Legendary. This is the best legendary for AoE. I don't really know what the best thing is for single target, but I like to use Spending Holy Power. Grants you 1% haste finishers for 12 seconds, stacking up to 5 times, constantly giving you about 5% haste, which is your main stat you need, which is really nice in raids to get more attacks out. Especially if you combine that with Zeal, you do more damage. So, I'm gonna say once again what the single target damage is. It is your Shield of Vengeance, Avenging Wrath, Wake of Ashes, Templar's Verdict, Divine Toll, Templar's Verdict, and then your Crusader Strike, Weight of Justice, Judgment, Hammer of Wrath, to keep on getting those Templar's Verdicts out. So that's what you're going to be wanting to do. I'll try and show it again. You're going to want to pop your Shield of Vengeance, and you're going to pop your Avenging Wrath, along with your Wake of Ashes, Templar's Verdict, Divine Toll, then your Templar's Verdict, and then continue up with as much as you can. See, and if you look at your shield, it's going to pop, dealing damage. That's why you pop it at the start, and you see it has a 1 minute 40-second timer. I use it mostly at the start of the poll to get more DPS out there, but if you know you can't really survive, or it's a new fight, like a new raid fight, do not use it at the start, but rather, other than that, just use it at the start, because as a Paladin, you will probably take aggro, and that's just another medication that you can use at the start, so there's not much else to it to make it much easier. But on top of just your normal rotation, you're going to want to hit your Divine Storm whenever it procs. It'll proc off of your Crusader Strike and make it glowing like it is right there, if you can see where my mouse is, or below the enemy's nameplate, down below, it's glowing, and you can see where it goes. Then it just hits that Divine Storm. Your second thing that you're going to want to be dealing with is AoE. AoE is about the exact same as single target, except I'm going to be using Divine Storm instead of Templar's Verdict. Templar's Verdict is really nice, but in AoE situations, if you've seen me in a dungeon, Divine Storm is about 95% of my damage, and this is going to be why. Because every ability you use, your Shield of Vengeance, your Avenging Wrath, your Wake of Ashes, all give you, after you hit them all combined, will give you a buff to your Divine Storm, making it hit harder. And if you have your Tempest of the Lightbringer Legendary equipped, it will do even more damage to the AoE targets. So when you go into AoE fights, you're going to start off with your Shield of Vengeance, your Avenging Wrath, your Wake of Ashes, and then just Divine Storm as much as possible. Hit your Divine Toll to get more AoE damage out there. If you look at my damage meter over here, I'm hitting over 20k. It's really easy with the Paladin to hit that burst if you're playing it decently. I'm not moving fast enough here to hopefully show you guys how to play it a bit more, but you can do more damage. And your damage does go down after your burst is gone. It does that for every class, so it shouldn't be too much of a surprise. And hopefully that helps with AoE and single target rotation. And then the last thing I want to talk about is your things that you might want to keep in mind when you're on your Paladin. One of the main things that you might want to keep on mind is your blessings. Your Blessing of Freedom can get rid of any immunity to movement pairing effects. Like, say you get a Chains of Ice on you or some sort of slow, you can just hit that and then you can run away. Blessing of Protection is really nice for you. It's a 5-minute cooldown. It gets rid of every single bit of aggro you have, but the downside is it's a 5-minute cooldown. It makes you immune to all physical damage and harmful effects for 10 seconds. It's basically a Divine Shield, but there's a few spells that still get through it, and it's half the mint time, so it's a win-win, I guess. The third blessing you have is Blessing of Sacrifice. You would put this on your tank or healer if they suck. If your tank sucks, put it on him. If your healer sucks, put it on them. If neither suck, just keep that in your spellbook. Don't put it in your bar, because unless you have a really bad tank, there should be no reason that you really need to use this. Turn Evil is just fear. If you go into places like Flakefall, the first boss on that big ooze, you can fear it with your Turn Evil. It's on my bar, I can cast it, but it's not really on my bar, because I open up my spellbook and cast it when I need to, which is not a good way to do it. Shield of the Righteousness does nothing for you as Ret because it requires a shield, and you're always using some sort of two-handed weapon. I use an axe, but I like to transpog into a sword, because I just think swords look way better than an axe or a mace. Especially when you're on a Paladin, swinging it against an enemy just looks way better in my opinion. All the emotions of the Paladin just look way better when it has a sword. But when you go into a fight like a raid scenario, you're going to want to be patient. Like, if this is the raid boss, you're going to want to move out of its mechanics a little bit. And when you're taking damage, make sure to pop your Word of Glory, because it does a lot of healing. And then your Shield of Vengeance, when it gets destroyed, it will also deal damage. So you just want to keep your Word of Glory up if you're going into a situation like this. I recommend just going into a situation like this and on this training dummy, any Raiders tanking dummy, and see how long you can last. Because you can use things like Avenging Shield to even buff your healing potential that you can get out. I am going to die, so I'm going to stop, because I don't really want to die right now, but I'm going to get myself back into full health. Flash of Light is something that you have, but it should not be your primary source of healing. The only time you want to be using your Flash of Light is when you're away from a target and you cannot get near it to do any damage to that target to get your Word of Glory from your 3 Holy Power, which you're generating by one of your 4 basic abilities. And when you do melee mechanics, make sure you're avoiding the target's abilities. Never stand in front of a target. Always stand behind the tank. If you're in front of the tank, you're easily going to get hit by cleave and other things around that area. And try to stay close, because you only have 2 AoE abilities. Blade of Justice and Judgment. And those are on 10 seconds cooldowns, both of them, and they do not help you much. Your Divine Toll is AoE and ranged. It's ranged more importantly, but it doesn't do anything if you're not up there to click. Paladin is a very bursty class, and you will not look good or do good if you do not burst. So you're just going to have to do your rotation, your Shield of Vengeance, Avenging Wrath, Wake of Ashes, either your Divine Storm or Templar's Verdict with a Divine Toll, and then either one of your main abilities. along with a Crusader Strike, Blade of Justice, Judgment, or Hammer of Wrath to finish it off, and just continuously do your rotation, and then eventually you'll get a Wake of Ashes. You will get one Wake of Ashes during the Avenging Wrath. But after you hit your Avenging Wrath and get another Divine Toll, you're going to want to hit that Divine Toll immediately after it comes off cooldown. You never want to see your Divine Toll come off cooldown. If your Wake of Ashes you want to pair, never use a Wake of Ashes unless you're pairing it with Avenging Wrath, because then it's not doing its damage, and it will only be generating you 3 holy power. Thanks to listening to me, and hopefully this helped a little bit on playing Paladin and what talents rotation that I use. It generally works for me. I can generally burst I've bursted 60k, 50k on AoE dungeon fights sometimes. I've also bursted about 30k in a raid once on one raid fight. I'm sorry about the lag that I'm having, but I cannot do much about it because of my internet and my computer. So thanks for listening to me. Hopefully you learn a little bit.